before we start, and this is really the foundation to everything I want to talk about afterwards. I put it in the title. It sounds like a silly question. A bocher actually once asked me this question very seriously, and the more I think about it, the more profound it becomes, and opens up many possibilities. Opens up, illuminates. That's really what I'm talking. It illuminates. Once you look at everything that you learn from the perspective of this silly sounding question, a lot of things that seemed obtuse or just eclectic, what's the relevance of this, suddenly become very relevant, very meaningful, and much deeper from a seemingly simple, in some people's minds, shallow questions. And I know when the Bachar asked this question, a lot of people laughed at it. The question is, does God have a personality? Because when you're reading through Tanakh, it sounds like it has a personality, a very puzzling personality, but it talks about God, Hashem loves, Hashem benichem al hara, things like that. Sounds like a personality. And the Chazal and Midrashim sounds like it has a personality. On the other hand, Hashem echad, if he's one, so as the Rambam says, if he's one, then ein lo guf, ein lo demusa guf. Since he's one, he can't possibly have a body. He can't have even demusa guf. And demusa guf, any form at all, any structure to him whatsoever, he would no longer be one, because as soon as there is some sort of structure, there's some sort of gvul, boundaries to him, and then there's something outside of those boundaries, so there's something other than him, so he's no longer one. And put it even simpler. Why would I want him to have a personality? Think about it. Why would you want God to have a personality? Well, I'm supposed to speak with him 3 times a day. How do you speak with someone who doesn't have a personality? How do you know who you're talking to and what way you should address them? You know, when you want to talk with somebody, it's very uncomfortable to try to have a discussion with somebody you've never met before, especially if they come from a foreign country, have a different culture than you. You don't know how to relate, what kind of a personality. You need to get a sense of the person's personality, so you have a sense of how you should address this person, what sort of things you should say, what you shouldn't say. So you want some sort of personality there that you can talk to. He has to be predictable in some sense. You know, what he likes, what he doesn't like. Then you can talk to him about the things that he likes and avoid the things he doesn't like. I'm supposed to serve Hashem. The same thing, can't just follow instructions. You have to know when he gives these instructions, what does he mean exactly? You know, there are many things that Torah says like this, and it would seem that you do this, but Jewish people don't do it that way. We do it otherwise. Why? Because we know what he really means. So, Mashal the Baal Shem Tov, the king who had different cooks, and the king. They asked the king what he'd want for dinner, and he said, fish. One cook made him fish, and the king had his head. The other cook made him roast beef. That's a real cook. You have to understand what he means. You have to have a hergish of what he means. So for many reasons, God's relating to the universe. How does he relate to the universe? He has to have some sort of personality. But then on the other hand, if he has a personality, then why is he my God? In what way is he God? He's limited. He has a personality. So he's stuck in this. So why am I worshiping him as God? So a personality seems to put limitations on him. I don't see anything in the chat. Okay, that's because I'm only looking at panelists. I get it. If I look at panelists and attendees, I still don't see anything. Maybe there are things there, but does God, I'm putting the question in here, and I'm waiting, of all these 10 attendees. Yes.
Isn't that a point of Shayich of Amuna to explain how that's the Esespheris, is the Raza de Mehemenusa, that it's, on the one hand, Hashem is Pshitus, but he comes in Esespheris. Isn't that the whole back and forth, the second half of Shayich of Amuna?
So you're onto something there. In Shayich of Amuna, Raza de Mehemenusa, it's called. Raza de Mehemenusa generally refers to the Esespheris Detzilus. That's a Raza V'Mehimenusa. And it's a famous proclamation, statement of the Ramak. Moshe Cordovero writes that somebody who doesn't know the Raza de Mehimenusa, say that's the Spheres Tetzilus, will be a kafir. Be a kafir from not knowing it. He's a kafir. Oh, finally, I got a note from Menali to what his personality. I'll get to that in a minute. So the Ramak says if he doesn't know Soda as Spheres, he'll be a kafir. The Alter Rebbe asks us a minute. There are many Pashat Yidden, my minim, and all Yidden are my minim b'nei my minim. So they don't know anything from Esther Spheres. How can you call them all kafrim? So he explains, the Ramak means, the Ramak so makes this clear in his language. He explains the Ramak means that if he's a chakran b'teva, he's a person who asks questions, he's a philosopher type. He likes to examine everything. If he's that type of person who makes those type of queries and analyses, and he doesn't know the Seid Raza Mehimenusa of Esther Spheres, he'll become a kafir. Why? Well, he'll become a kafir because he won't understand. HaKadosh Baruch Hu ain't safe. He's ain't safe means he could be anything. There's no definition to him whatsoever. How can he create a world that has gvul? How could he be mashgiach on all the pratim, all the details of this world? He's ain't safe. How could it be that he gets upset with this and with this he loves and he doesn't like this and he likes that? He's ain't safe. He's totally beyond this world. So the interface, and that Manali, that's the answer to your question. A personality is an interface between God and this world, is the Esther Spheres of Tzilus. It's just like a personality. A personality is not you. Okay, many of us, especially in the age of Facebook, come to believe that my personality is me. I identify with that. That's who I am. Now, your personality, or we call it in psychology, Jungian psychology, the persona, is something that as you were growing up, as a child, or especially as an adolescent, you found certain modalities of interacting with the world that worked for you. Some of us were very good at it. We practiced a lot. We stood in front of the mirror, some of us, and practiced. How do I relate to other people? What sort of clothes can I wear? Not just physical clothes, but the costumes that I guise myself in. How do I present myself to everybody? What works? Others of us were very clumsy at it. Some people found that the best thing for them to do is bark at everybody and look down at them and intimidate them, and that's going to work for them. That became their personality. Others found the best way is to go about saying yes, 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 and being a little puppy dog. That's worked for them. Those are dysfunctional personalities. Some people found fantastic personalities. It really worked. Everybody likes them with this personality. But that personality is not really who they are. They could develop later in life a different personality. It's not who they are, but they're presenting this in order to relate to the world. Just like you have in the world of computers, you have the processor inside and the processes that are happening, and there has to be a user interface, because the user can't relate directly to those processes. So we have a graphic user interface. There's a button over here, and there's files over there, and there's a menu over here. But that's not what the program is. There's no real buttons in there. There's no real menus in there. That's just the way that you can relate to the program that's happening. So we created a personality for the processes that are happening on a computer. And we call those the interface, the user interface. But that's not the program itself. So the same thing, people have this personality. So the question is, what is God's interface to us and to the universe? And we say it's the Esospheres Tetzilus. That's his personality. But that creates for us huge problems. You see the problems, right? The problem is, so God is this personality. So on the one hand, if I'm saying, well, he's just putting on his personality, it's like to him, like the interface and it has nothing to do with the program itself, or a personality a person could be putting on, it's just a show, he's just acting. Well, then if that's all it is, just a show, then when he's happy, he's not really happy. When he's upset, he's not really upset. Then really I have no real connection to him because it's all just a show. But if you're going to say that he really is invested in it, he's totally engaged in his personality, until it becomes him, then once again, if that's all he is and he's so predictable, then for what is he my God? So Manelli, one person out there is asking questions. Who is Manelli? I don't know. But Manelli is asking, what does personality mean? Which I think I described. So you're saying that God doesn't have a personality, but only from Das Tachton there is, and that is necessary for the world to run. So I'm saying, no, that can't be so. It can't be only from Das Tachton that he has a personality, because then it's not really him. And then he's not really involved. And he's saying, I love this and I don't, but it doesn't really mean it. It's just an actor. And that can't be so. So I've got a problem from two directions. If he is not this, then what is concerned to me? And if he is totally this, then why is he my God? I got a problem. And all this is explained in the Raza de Mehemnusa, the Seid Eses Virus de Tzilus. And is this making sense? I need some feedback. Like if I were sitting and giving a shiur, I'd be able to look at people and be able to see where they're coming from. Manelli, I'll promote you to panelists. I don't know who you are, but I'll give you the opportunity. And anybody else wants to be promoted to panelist and be able to come on, please just let me know. Somebody from Beis B'Tzalel is there. Amazing. And then Avram, do you think the rest of the people following this are following? I can't look at their faces and see. That's the real thing that bothers about me, about being on the web. And I think you're muted as well, so I can't even hear you. Shlomo Haberger says this is making sense, and it is a conundrum. Okay, that's exactly what, if you are confused, if you're in a conundrum, then you are following me. Okay. And now Alex says he loves me. Very, very nice. Avram, you were saying?
It says if it's raza de mehemenusa, it means it's not so simple. Because if it would be simple, then it wouldn't be a raza, it wouldn't be a secret.
Exactly. Okay, but the idea of Chabad is to take something that's a raza and to make it understandable. I remember when was it? I can't remember, but it was probably in the 1980s in London. Feivish Vogel got a fantastic idea. We're going to make a conference for all of London on Jewish mysticism. And there were posters all on the Tube, that's a subway in London, is the Tube, everywhere, the huge fanfare for it, huge, put a lot of work behind advertising this, everywhere. And they had, one of the panelists was Jonathan Sachs. He wasn't yet chief rabbi, but he was very popular. And I think they brought Adin Steinsaltz as well, and Jewish mysticism. And the Rebbe wrote a letter for it because the Feivish's idea was mysticism and Kabbalah. That was really hot. So that'll draw people, mysticism. The Rebbe wrote a letter for that conference, and in the letter, the Rebbe says that really it shouldn't be called mysticism because the whole point of a makubal is to demystify, take things that are mystical and demystify them. So we're trying to take the Raza de Mehemenusa and demystify it. But you see over and over again in Chabad, when we demystify it, it becomes even more amazing and mystifying, even once we put it in rational language of some sort. Mordechai Shemel is asking, why can he not be our God if he has a personality? Okay, so he's not confused enough yet. Okay, if he has a personality, the Rebbe put this once as if God is only a little smarter than, just a little smarter than me, then why is he my God? Well, what is he my God? I think what the Rebbe means, just a little smarter than me. He can be very, very smart, but if it's just a matter of intelligence, he's not a God. He has to be, and I'll tell you why, because that's a demusa guf, what the Rambam calls demusa guf. has some sort of a body of boundaries. He is very, 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 very smart, but there's a point where you can't add on a varies anymore. It still is chachma. It still is wisdom. That's not God. That means that there is something else that's not chachma. And so he's not all. He's not everything. And I think the best one who puts this the best is Rabbeinu Bachya or Bachaya, depends on whether you're Sephardi or Ashkenazi. Rabbeinu Bachya in the Shara B'tochen, the Rebbe told many people to learn Shara B'tochen, and in the Chayvus Levavos. The Chayvus Levavos, the Sefer, they say never moved from the Tzemach Tzedek's Tish. So the Rabbeinu Bachya says that you can't have betochen in two people or in two beings. If you say, I have my betochen on him and in him, you don't have betochen in anybody. I'm trusting him, but also him. What are you saying? You're saying, I'm trusting him, but just in case, also him. I mean, so you're the same as the guy who's coming through Kriyas Yamsuf holding on to Pesel Micha, just in case. So you got another little getchka. You see, God is the Keli Van Veo, but just in case, I got a little this other guy just in case. So you don't have any God there. So if God has any limitations whatsoever, so he's not your God. It means it's already a form of Avodah polytheism. There's room for another God over here. So that's why he said that Hashem Echad means that he cannot have a personality. But if he doesn't have a personality, then how do we relate to him? And how is he running a world? How is the Meshgiach on all the details? There's no relationship with us or with the world. I hope that's Mordechai. Let me know if that's making Avram. Yes.
We said, I remember a very long article you wrote for explaining a beer from the Tzemach Tzedek on the mashal of the Avu Ben, that it's like the father. He goes to the level of his son. He sits on the floor with him. He plays with him. At the same time, he's the father, but he's really coming down to the level of the son. I remember you gave a whole mashal from this, that you went to a preschool once and you had a whole...
Oh, yeah. Just a minute. I'm trying to remember if that's from the Maggid, in the Maggid, or from the... Is it in Kesser Shem Tov?
In the Mitzvah Manas Alokos, he brings it also.
In where? But the original Makor for it is in the Maggid. I think it's originally Mashal of Baal Shem Tov. So the father wants to play with the child. I think this is really the seminal mashal for Esesphiris and Islapshus and Esesphiris. And it's good to hold on to the whole way through. The father has a child. The little kid's playing on the ground. And the father loves the child very much. Out of his love for this child, he says, well, I'm up here, the child is down there. The father gets down on the ground, and it says, "V'neldesbei midis naires." So childish emotions are born in him. So it's not that he pretends to be a child. He actually has these midas of a child. So you can imagine he's playing there in the sand or the mud and having a great time. Or he's playing with the blocks and piling up the blocks, and the kid knocks them over. And so if you're an adult, the kid knocked you over. What are you doing? I'm trying to build something over here. But if you have these childish midas in you, you say, oh, that's so much fun, knock over the blocks. And he's laughing, he's giggling like a child. So as Avram was pointing out, but I'm sorry, I want to say it because I was there. I had this opportunity of auditing in a child study center at the University of British Columbia. And most of the time, you had teachers coming and standing behind a one-way glass so they could see, and the kids couldn't see them. But I was sitting there together with the teachers. And there was one instructor, so we're talking about preschool kids. So one instructor, a tall, lanky Japanese guy, and he would be sitting on the floor and playing a game with the kids. So he'd like be playing fish or something like that. And the director told me, watch him, but watch his eyes. So you'd be watching him, and he's mamish like a little kid. The kids are relating to him as though he's one of the little kids. Oh, you beat me. Oh, I don't have that card, like that. But the director told me watch his eyes. So I'm watching his eyes, and I noticed that once every about 30 seconds, his eyes scan the entire room. And he knows everything that's going on in that room. You can see he's in charge of it. And we saw at one point 2 kids came over, and they're yelling, he took it from me, he took it. And he lifts his head up from the game, and he listens to what they have to say, misader everything with them, like a real adult. And then immediately he's back into the game like a little child again. So you see this hislabshus, that he's there totally, but he's not. He remains an adult. This is razadeh mehemenusa. You see there that an adult is capable to some degree of mimicking this razadeh mehemenusa. It's not the real thing, but at least give us some grasp of it. So now I'm going to share my screen. And like I said, bear with me because this is not something I'm used to doing. I'm going to share this, and it tells me that I have to actually, I'm there on that screen, and I've still got the chat up in front of me. So now you should see the mimer in my Google Doc over here. If you see it, the only thing I don't see my panelists anymore, I probably can still hear them, and I can still see your chat. So somebody just give me a thumbs up in the chat that you can see. I have this insecurity using a new app. Give me a thumbs up in the chat that yes, somebody raised their hand. Yes, I can see it. Thank you very much. Okay, good. I see Avram Katz says I see you, but everybody else we can see it. So I hope Avram can see this as well. But if you can't, he'll just look in his sefer. So the first part, I'll just say over briefly, because what I want to get to is in Sif base. I don't want to cut short the mimer, but with limited time, limited resources, so I want to get straight to the point over here. So the mimer, the header, the envelope of the mimer, the Chassidim call it, the address of the mimer, the wrapping, is that we're asking a question in the Haftorah from Achron Shel Pesach. It says that v'nachal of ruach havaya, ruach chachma bina, ruach eitzel gevura, ruach das v'yasavaya, that there'll be a descendant of David HaMelech, Ben Yishai, and the spirit of Hashem will rest on him. It says this be a spirit of wisdom and understanding, counsel and might, knowing and fear of Hashem. And it goes on and says that he will be v'yarach alav ruach Hashem, which literally would mean that it's repeating, that he has the spirit of Hashem. But Chazal, probably because they see the repetition over here, they say that means that he'll be moreach v'dayin, he'll judge by smell. He won't have to listen to, you're sitting with this dayan who happens to be Mashiach, and you're listening to the tainus, and you're thinking, well, I should ask him this question, I should ask that question. And Mashiach says, you're lying, I can tell. How can you tell I'm lying? You smell like a liar. That's it. What am I doing sitting here? So that's really the question. It's implying that he's going to be judging with Chochmah and Bina, but if he smells them out, what's the Chochmah Bina doing over it? He's smelling them out. And we answer that when you start off with a Ruach Havaya, the Chochmah and Bina is on a whole different level. And we want to know, what's this whole different level that you're at? What's a whole different level of Chochmah and Bina on a whole different level when you have Ruach Havaya? In other words, when there's Elokus here, within the context of Elokus, Chochmah and Bina on an entirely different level. What is this entirely different level of Chochmah and Bina when they are divine wisdom and divine understanding? That's really what it's about. So you can see that that's already a lead-in to discussing the wisdom and understanding of Olam Hatzilus, which is divine wisdom and understanding. But now let's get to the point which I started translating in Sif Beis. And if you're learning this mimer, I'd really recommend learning the mimarim that are mentioned in the footnotes, but especially the seminal mimer, Pasach Eliyahu in Torah Or. And that's a real fundamental mimer. if you made a handful of 5 fundamental Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe, that would certainly be one of the 5. Pasuk Parshas Vayera in Torah Or. Okay, so the Maimer starts discussing this, what the Alter Rebbe calls Maimer Chazal, and from the Zohar. We don't have this statement in our Zohar. In the Zohar, we have it in print. But the Alter Rebbe cites it from the Zohar. So we have one of 2 possibilities. It could be that the Alter Rebbe had a ksav of the Zohar, and there are many different ksavim that are not the same as the printed Zohar. In his ksav, it was this way, or that this is the way he learned it from his teachers. The Baal Shem Tov had this ksav, the Maggid had this. They had this from Echia Sholoni. They had this. That this is how Rabbi Shimon originally meant it. Or it could be that he's paraphrasing, because very often you have in the Tikkuni Zohar and the Zohar Chadash, you have the Shem Havaya, L'mayla Mayla, or Shem Havaya, L'mata Mata. You have this Lashon, L'mayla Mayla, Mata Mata, talking about Shem Havaya and talking about Elokus. The way the Alter Rebbe says it is Orein Sof, L'mayla Mayla, and Ketz, L'mata Mata, and Tachlis, this infinite light, endlessly higher and higher, endlessly lower and lower. So the question that's asked in Chabad by all the Rebbeim, and the Rebbe pointed out when in the Freeman, when the Rebbe said this mimer, the Rebbe pointed out that each of the Rebbeim has a mimer on this statement, every one of the Rebbeim, and they follow the same general structure as well. The mimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe on this statement, L'mayla Mayla, is Basi Lagani. The third mimer of Basi Lagani is on Orin Sof L'mayla Mayla Adin Ketz. And you see how in this mimer, the Rebbe refers to all of the maimarim of the Rebbeim on the statement, Orin Sof L'mayla Mayla Adin Ketz L'mayla Mayla Adin Tachlis. And this is like the key to everything. This statement is the key to the whole quandary we were in. All of it is answered in the statement. We understand the statement. To understand the statement, we ask a question. It's an easy question. What took higher and lower in Ein Sof? Ein Sof means there's no boundaries. Could be anywhere, could do anything. If you don't have any boundaries, you don't have any directions at all. So how can you be going higher and lower? Higher from what? Towards what? Right? Imagine, just to make it simpler, imagine a single entity in infinite space. And that's all there is, just this one entity, a little point somewhere, inside infinite space. Can it go higher or lower? There's no movement in any direction. Wherever it goes, you can't say, well, relative to what is it higher? Relative to what is lower? You have to have a boundary somewhere. And relative to this boundary, it's gone further in a direction. But even if you think it's in a direction, what makes that higher? What makes that lower? There has to be a structure of some point, of some sort, which in some way defines a higher and a lower. So directions to begin with don't make any sense, but especially higher and lower. What's going on? Okay, give me some, Avram, just say aha or something like that so I hear somebody. Okay, hi, that's good enough. Okay, I wish I could see some faces here. Okay, so the answer we give is, it seems we're speaking not of higher and lower within the infinite itself, not within the Or Ein Sof itself, but as the Or Ein Sof are within the Elamis. The translator here's the cosmos. So what we mean by higher and lower, higher and higher, is that there's higher worlds and lower worlds. When we're going to explain what's higher about and what's lower, we're going to get to that. But you're going to find the Or Ein Sof there, some presence of it. And there's a key word over here. It expresses its presence. That's how I tried to. It's going to see inside in the Hebrew. It says, "But pirish the Or Ein Sof l'mayla chulu l'mata chulu hu shuhu nimtza," and in parentheses, umispashet b'chol hadargas sheb'chol olamos. It's mispashet. I translated that as some way it expresses its presence. It's not just nimtza. It's mispashet. There's some expression of it. I mean, the Kodesh Baruch Hu could be there with no expression whatsoever. There's no metzias whatsoever. He's there. But we say, no, it's nimtza. There's a metzias of him there. And that implies it's mispashet. There's some sort of expression of the of infinite. In other words, everywhere you go within Seder Shtalshus, from the lowest to the highest, there is something infinite about it. The Or Ein Sof is expressed there in some way. Okay, and the Maimer becomes more amazing when you look in the Makoros. That the Makoros is, you don't really know what's being said necessarily, and here the Maimer very clearly defines for you what's being said there. So the Rebbe asked the question, so if you're going to say that he's infinitely higher and infinitely lower, so why are we saying, why not just say Leis Haser Ponu Minei? Why divide in two distinct ideas, up and down? Just say Leis Haser Ponu Minei. There's no place void of him. There's no place where he is not. In Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says that that's the whole Amunah of a Yid. That's the Ikar Amunah Shebishvil Nivra Adam. That's why a person is created, Lahamin Deleis Haser, to know that there's no place void of him. That's all the. So why you have to believe? Not just there's no place void of him, but higher and higher and lower and lower. What's a higher and higher and lower for? It's just like a lot behind this question. But if you think about it, very much a lot inside the question. There's a lot of teichen. It's a very rich question. But the most important thing for us is now it's giving us the focus that what are we talking about? We're talking about how could there be two distinct ideas in Or Ein Sof? Or Ein Sof should be simple. It's infinite, it should be simple. Tachlis apshitus. But we see that it manifests itself in two directions, up and down. Why? And in the Sefer Echin, the Encyclopedia of Chabad Thought, so Or Ein Sof is Chelik Gimel. Most of Chelik Gimel is all about Or Ein Sof. And then it starts going into something else. But then Chelik Daled, Rabbi Yoel realized there's more to talk about Or Ein Sof. Surprise, surprise. There's unlimited amount to talk about infinite light. Okay. And the next, there in the Chelik Gimel is the kavin, base kavin. There are two directions in Or Ein Sof. And the whole entry there about two directions in Or Ein Sof. And surprise, surprise, a lot of that entry is referring over and over again to this mimer, V'nachalav. So it's if you want a commentary, the Rabbi Yoel's commentary on this mimer, it's right there in Sefer Erchin, the Or Ein Sof in Chelik Daled. It's with all the miluim is Rabbi Yoel's commentary on this mimer. From us asking, perhaps a similar question, Echad, 1 over 7 heavens and earth, could have just said 1 over everything. So why do we say Echad is Aleph, Ches is 7 Rikim and the earth, and Dalet is all in 4 directions? Yeah, so that's how the Or Ein Sof is within Olames. And we have to say higher and lower, not just everywhere, but higher and lower. Why this obsession with higher and lower? What's that all about? Okay, so then we go to a mimer of the Rebbe Maharash, Tafresh Chaf Zayin. So that's the first year of the Rebbe Maharash's Nesias, and he says a mimer. And it's a wonderful mimer to learn. The Rebbe Maharash is saying a mimer of his father, the Tzemach Tzedek, but he throws in once in a while just a few words, that like sparks coming out, sudden like a gilui of some sort. I think what I've learned of the Rebbe Maharash, he does this, that he seems to be repeating something and saying over a mimer, he's saying Shar Yichud V'Amunah or something like that. But every once in a while he throws in a couple of words that, whoa, just a minute, that changes everything. So that's what this mimer, you can look it through. So the Rebbe Maharash says, he asked the same question, and he says that to understand this, we have to explain the distinction between the higher world, Atzilus, and Olmas Biyah, Bria, Yitzir, Asiyah. So what he's saying, in essence, is he's saying, well, to understand our of higher and higher and lower and lower, what is higher and lower? Well, there's higher worlds and lower worlds. What makes this a higher world and this a lower world? Right? So you see this form to the mimer. You get it? Like people learn the Rebbe's Maimarim, and when they chazer them, they say, it's like, first the Rebbe talks about this, then the Rebbe talks about that, and then he asks this question. No. It all flows. It flows beautifully once you get the rhythm of it, the rhythm, the theme behind it. The Rebbe is talking about orins of higher and higher, lower and lower. Okay, to answer that, and this is the structure of all these Maimarim. To answer that, well, what's higher and what's lower? So we ask, there's higher worlds and lower, but you have to understand the distinction between Tzilus and almost Biyah, because that's higher and lower. Get it? Right? Understand the thread of the Maimer. It's much easier to memorize the Maimer and say it over if you get directions the Maimer is going in and why it's going from here to the flow. Okay? Flow of the Maimer, it's so much easier to say it over. So for that, we go to the Tikkuni Zohar, the Pasach Eliyahu. It's in our Nusach, we say it before Mincha of Shabbos. In many Sidurim, it's every morning. In Nusach, in the Sephardi Nusach, it's many of them. It's every morning they say Pasach Eliyahu, and the reason is the Ramak says that in this from the Hakdamas of Tikkuni Zohar, Pasach Eliyahu, are most of the foundational elements of the Torah Sasod. You have Oros V'Kelim, you have Esther Sfiraz Nusa, that's the Spheres, and many other basic foundational issues in Kabbalah. So I think, and therefore, Dean Steinsaltz was once asked, "What is Kabbalah?" And he said, "It's native Jewish theology." That's how he answered it. This is right, okay. When you say the Chassidus of Kabbalah, we mean the foundations, the fundamentals of Jewish theology, because that's all Kabbalah really is. People say, no, I taught the Rambam, Hilchas Mada, that's Jewish theology. I thought you'd go to Jewish theology to read Kreskas or Sefer Ikrim. That's Jewish theology in the language of philosophy, Greek and Arabic philosophy. Jewish theology in its native language, that's Kabbalah and Chassidus. And when we're learning, especially a Maimer, when we're learning Chassidus, we're learning about what are the fundamentals of Jewish theology. What are Jews, in other words, when Jews talk about God, what do they mean? When Jews do mitzvahs, what's the theology behind mitzvahs? What's the theology behind doing a mitzvah or learning Torah? That's what it's all about. And I can't think of a Maimer that's not about that. The Zohar is really a philosophy of mitzvahs. What happens when you're doing mitzvah? What's a mitzvah all about? So that's what it's all about. And this gets to the Chassidus over here in this Pasach Eliyahu, and that's where we're going from, following from that. Once in a while, just write a comment over there. I know I'm not just talking to a box. Say something. It really is helpful if you say or type something. Okay, so there in the Zohar, it says, Kama Gufin Tikinas Lon. So it's talking about Esser Spheres. The Kadosh Baruch Hu emanated 10 spheres. And you arrange many bodies for the 10 spheres. I'm following this and it's flowing well. Thank you, Shlomo. That's all I need to hear. Okay, some feedback. Okay, once in a while. So there, look inside over here. This b'Tikkuni Zohar. V'kama gufin tikinas lon. You and I wrote that you formed. And I said, what did I write? Arranged tikinas lon. For these Esser Spheres, you arranged bodies. They're called bodies relative to the clothing that they're clothes, that's clothing covering over them. Meaning that the 10 spheres are called bodies, right? The Zohar refers to the 10 spheres of the world of Atzilus as bodies, and the low worlds, Bria, Tzia, even the 10 spheres of each of those worlds as clothing. So the lower worlds clothe and conceal, they cover over the 10 spheres of Atzilus that are invested in them. Okay? Our world is God's clothing, right? It's the outer clothing. So this world is God's coat, his jacket, whatever it is, his raincoat, whatever it is. And Olam Yetzirah is the basic clothing, and the inner clothing is Olam Abriya. It's all clothing. So we're not seeing him when we look out in the world, we're seeing his clothing. And beautiful clothing, amazing clothing. Wow. So you're judging the person by the clothing. So don't look at just the clothing. When you look at the clothing, look at Mashi Yeshbe, what's inside the clothing. Right? So somebody who's says somebody who's just going for a walk and somebody's going, he's chazering, he's walking along and he's chazering mishnayos, and he said, oh, what a beautiful tree. He said, what a beautiful tree. He's appreciating God's tree. You don't understand, the tree is the outer clothing. The Torah that you're saying, that's him himself. It's Chochmaseh Yisbarech. So you're grabbing the clothing and not what's inside the clothing. That's the part. I'm not sure what you mean, Alex, by saying not square enough to be called a box, okay? But, that I called it a black box. I'm looking at just my computer and my picture of myself. So when I hear a voice or see text, it reminds me, yes, there are people there. Shetach HaMekabel. It changes everything, that there's somebody there. Okay, so the is on as if, not actually, since also something possibly, you're praising God's creation. So this is a private note. I don't know why Avram is putting this privately, but it says as ki'ilu is chayiv. Can't even remember the lashon. Okay, I'm confused. But it's not. It's only ki'ilu, as though, by saying how beautiful this tree is. I mean, another time you're not learning Torah, you say beautiful tree, fantastic, but you're supposed to appreciate God's creation. What else are you thinking about in Pesukei de Zimra if you didn't appreciate God's creation? But when you're learning Torah, and now you're engaged with the Panemius. So you don't go look at the Chitzenius when you're looking at the Panemius. Adarab, in the Chitzenius, in the outer clothing, you're supposed to see the inner, not when you're involved in the inner, going looking at the outer. Yeah. Isn't the tree, Shlomo Hamburger is asking, isn't the tree like the Alter Rebbe, who didn't see the beams, but saw the sparks behind the beams? Yeah, but here he's looking, he's supposed to look at the tree and see the divine within the tree. And to a degree, we see that when you're looking at a tree and not seeing the tree, but the beauty of the tree. That's not the tree itself, but the beauty. Beauty means the tree is pointing at something higher. Maybe the poor problem is, he says, Man na'in ilan zeh, how beautiful is this tree? When he should be saying, this creation, how beautiful is this creation of God? It's expressing him. So you see the nitzutz eloki within the tree, and not just its beauty, which is of the spheres of Asiya. See the spheres of Atzilus within there. Yeah. So these are the spheres are called bodies. Very strange. And our world and its Yetzirah and Bria, those are clothing. What does that mean? So the Alter Rebbe explains what that means. There in Torah and Pasuk Eli on Torah Or. It's a beautiful. Just learn the first part of that mimer. So the Alter Rebbe looks at human body and human clothing. Now you understand why Jews are tailors, right? The Shmata business is a Jewish business. We make clothing, right? Because making clothing, be a tailor, a Schneider, is a Jewish craft. And here we get a deeper understanding of what clothing is. Really, bodies are also clothing. So we can see two things behind a body. It's clothing. The human body is going to give us a huge insight to the Raza de Mehem Nusa, because your body is clothing and not clothing. Right? You're clothing for the soul. Eov says, or Basar Talbisheni. You dress me. God dresses me in skin and meat. So the meat is my clothing. It's clothing for the soul. The nefesh chiyainis, it's clothing. Okay, yeah. Avram Gadol, how talented is the artist who made that tree? I remember I was in a Volkswagen van in the early 1970s with artists and musicians, and we're coming up to Williams Lake, way up north in British Columbia in May, and we're driving through the night, and we see the sunrise, and one of the artists says, "Wow, I wish I could meet the artist that did that." Yeah, so art. Okay, so the body, the Alter Rebbe uses the body itself. From my flesh I perceive the divine. So our bodies are clothing, but they're not clothing. Why? Because your body fuses, it becomes one with the soul. It's misach miyuchad im nefesh. And whereas real clothing remains separate from the person, it remains separate from his physical body. Like, you don't have to rip off. It doesn't hurt to rip off your clothes, unless it got very sticky. But otherwise, it doesn't. You can just, they don't become part of you. Whereas the body becomes part of the nefesh. And there, and other Maimarim doesn't bring this here, but that the nefesh feels pain, feels the pain of the body. When the body is in pain, it hurts the nefesh. Not just the nefesh chiyainis, the nefesh hasichlis is hurt. It's a Meisav, there was a chassid, cannot remember his name, but he was carved to Beis Rebbe, to the Beis Harav, to the Rabbeim. The Frierdiker Rebbe describes him standing on Yom Kippur. They stood throughout the entire Yom Kippur. It's hard to imagine, but as a bocher, I saw Rav Mentlik stood the entire Yom Kippur. Okay, and this chassid, but he stood. He put up his one foot, and he stood, and he was misbeinen. It's just in his beininess the entire Yom Kippur. I'm sure he must, it doesn't say, but I'm sure he must have interrupted to daven, at least the Yikr davening, maybe not the Piyutim, but the Yikr davening, but it was his beininess the entire Yom Kippur. There's one Yom Kippur, he had a blister on his finger, and the blister wouldn't let him daven, wouldn't let him be misbeinen. He could not meditate, he couldn't contemplate, because of this blister on his finger. And he looks at the finger and he says, "Finger, oh finger, little finger, give me a break. What are you interfering?" And some pus came into the blister, and the blister burst. Now he was able to go back to his beininess. But what's amazing over here to the Frierdiker Rebbe was a little blister on his finger wouldn't allow him, a person who's capable of standing there for 26 hours and just contemplating the divine, but a little blister on one finger won't allow him. So you see how much the physical body affects the nefesh of the person to such a degree, right? Now, if I was sitting with people that, wow, yeah, amazing, okay, here I see nothing. Okay, what can you do? So my MacBook Pro is getting excited. That's about it. So the body becomes really one, but a physical clothing, like if you use a stain, there's a stain on your clothing, that doesn't hurt you. Yes, some people are very hurt by that, but it doesn't really affect you that there's a stain on your clothing. So I'll take that off and I'll put other clothing on, or I'll wash it off. It doesn't hurt me, right? A stain on the body, something that stains the body, makes a bruise on the body, that hurts. Somebody rips my clothing, it doesn't hurt me. Right? I think in many ways we can use a metaphor of a mechanism. Get in a car, right? There's a huge distinction between an organism and a mechanism. right? You're mislabish in an organism. Your nefesh becomes this body. Your body, it becomes part of you. You get in a car, or you're running your computer or other device. It doesn't become one with you. You don't become one with it. It's a very different type of thing. And the car doesn't have that oneness. Just like the closeness don't have that oneness. The body all started off as one cell and became a body through mitosis, through a cell splitting up. This one cell became this one body. And so the body has this memory of its oneness and remains essentially one. And that therefore it's capable of being a kli to a body, which is essentially one. It can receive a soul. The body can receive a soul because it has an essential oneness. That's what makes it an organism. And so it becomes alive with the soul. And it becomes nefesh-like to the point that somebody can examine it and see everything that's going on in the nefesh through what's happening in the body. And if you're intelligent enough, you realize cells can't be possibly doing this all on their own, but this is amazing what these cells are doing. How do they know what to do? Well, there's a nefesh there. And the cells are reflecting the nefesh because the cells have become one with this nefesh. And that's why they're doing these things. That doesn't happen at all in a mechanism. A mechanism, you take disparate parts that come from all over the world. This part's made in Taiwan, and this part's made in California, and this part's made in Germany. And you put all these parts together, and they work together, but they don't have that oneness to them that they're capable of receiving a nefesh. And so that's the way they work. This thing makes this thing do that, and that thing makes this thing do that. Not like in a body where everything just knows what it's supposed to do. There's a cut on a finger somewhere, like that blister that the chassid had, and they sends a message to the brain, and the brain tells the thyroid and the pituitary gland to release these hormones. These hormones are released, and the cells in the body know there's pain over here, and this has to be fixed. And these cells go there, and they line up, and they start doing their work, and everything just knows what it's supposed to do. It's not at all like, so it becomes nefesh-like. You see nefesh within it. Like later in the Maimon, it says, you look at a body, even when it's not doing anything, you see life there. Completely unlike a mechanism, which is more like clothing, it doesn't become alive. It's not really, in that way, a real kli receptacle for life, because it doesn't have that quality to it. Yeah. So Rochi Katzman is saying that, been thinking a lot about the mind body, and it's trying to apply that to Avodas Hashem. But this is the amazing signal, the lashon of Chassidus, the Rebbe developed this of the Maggid to be able to understand the divine through the human experience of the human psyche and even the physical body of the human being. It's this beautiful, beautiful mashalim. So the body is clothing, but not clothing. It's clothing for the body because it's not for the soul. It's clothing for the soul because there's a huge distance between body and soul. But the soul is ruchni and the body is the soul is entirely aphysical, and the body is purely physical. It's this huge distance, huge gap between them. So the body is obviously not of the soul. It's just clothing for the soul. But it's not just clothing for the soul. The soul is invested in it. Pain of the body means pain for the soul. Even the highest aspects of the soul are pained by what's going on in the body. So that's one way of looking at the mashal. And then we go deeper there in Pasuk Eliyahu and Torah Or. And we're going to wrap up now because it's already 1:00, and we'll continue next Sunday, Be'ezus Hashem. Let me wrap this part off, though. That within the soul itself, we also find this body and clothing within the soul itself. That's the spiritual faculties that are elicited from the soul. There's intellect and emotions, seichel and midos. That's the body of the human soul. But articulate thought, speech and action, articulate thought, that's how I translate machshava. Machshava, that's translated generally in our books as thought. I don't know what that means. Machshava means the thoughts running through your mind that you hear, that you are articulating thoughts to yourself. It's not thinking. Machshava does not mean thinking. It's just your articulation of those thoughts. But it's not articulation to others, it's articulation to yourself. And it may be very, very subtle to the point that you become unaware of it and just aware of the seichel and the midah itself. But it's still there. There's always some sort of, in a conscious being, there's always going to be some sort of articulations of your emotions or thoughts. And even just articulations that have no emotions and nothing beyond, just empty, could also be there. Speech to yourself. Although that, Rachi says, although that could be misleading, because it could be very, like I said, very subtle. There's ma'aseh sheb'machshava, dibur sheb'machshava, machshava sheb'machshava. There's act within speech, within thought. There's within machshava, articulated thought. There's when you actually see the letters, or when you're thinking, how would I say this over? That's speech within thought. But thought within thought, machshava sheb'machshava, that's just the articulations which could be just to yourself somehow and not even heard, but somehow you are articulating. The Friedrich Rebbe calls singing is a type of dibur, asius, expressions. Yeah, but it could be speech to yourself, could be. Articulate thought is what I use. Speech and action, they are clothing to the soul. Which means like this, that intellect and emotion, no, the soul's completely beyond intellect and emotion, completely beyond even intellect and emotion, not just completely beyond body, but even completely beyond intellect and emotion. So in a certain way, intellect and emotion is far closer to action than it is to the soul itself. So that way it makes it like clothing. But the soul invests itself, mislabish. This is, I'm pretty sure, the Alter Rebbe's most common metaphor, lavush and mislabish. And in the Kahas translations that the first generation of translators to English used, enclose. But enclose, I don't know that it's really an English word. I think, you just said just clothes itself, but I think to really express it, the word invest works. These are vestments, and we invest yourself. Invest really brings it across. Clothing doesn't mean simply that you put on this clothing. It means you're invested and engaged within this, so that you've really put yourself into this. This is where you are at right now. Like the mashal of the father who's playing with the child, and this is where he's at right now. He's invested within this. But then investment means that you can be there within that, but beyond it at the same time. That's the enigma of the entire mimer and the whole Maila, Mata, Mata, that Razadim Hemnu says again, it's all summed up in this mashal of hislabshus, investment. Maybe that's why Jews are high-risk investors. It's interesting, the study, I think it's the University of Pennsylvania study, that looked for patterns in Jewish wealth. And one of the 3 patterns in Jewish wealth is that Jews make high-risk investments. So maybe that's a reflection of this investment that the Kadosh Baruch Hu makes in the world. Hislabshus, the Alter Rebbe is called, really means that type of investing yourself into something. So, more than clothing, it's similar to clothing. So this is mentamitization. Take a look at that in Kabbalah tunes. So we want to get into this, how the soul is invested within Seichel and Midas, so that the Seichel and Midas become one with this with the Nefesh, but on the other hand, they still remain clothing. But since it got to 1:06 p.m., So I just invite everybody to please be back here again. This was a nice experiment. And consider, please, becoming one of the panelists and speaking a little and interrupting me more. It'll make it easier for me to give the share as well. And you can share the link with your friends. Just tell them to go to Chabad.org/Zoom at 12 noon next Sunday, Be'ezras Hashem. Okay, I guess I could send out reminder invites. We'll be sending out a mailing. And I'll share this doc with anybody who sends me an email to Freeman at Chabad.org, and then you can take a look at the doc itself. But can you PDF the text? I can PDF that. That's probably a better idea. I'll PDF it, and yeah, we'll go from there. Okay, thank you. See you next week. See you next. How do I stop this? End.